Hello and welcome to Meet the Writers. I'm Georgina Godwin and the show today is being recorded in Ubud, Bali, Indonesia. My guest was born in Melbourne but has lived here in Ubud for 30 years. Her memoir, Fragrant Rice, is an account of her life on this fabled island, interspersed with Balinese recipes and insights into local traditions. She's also created the international Ubud Writers and Readers Festival in response to the 2002 Bali bombings. It's been named by Harper's Bazaar UK as one of the top festivals in the world and by ABC's Asia Pacific network as the next Edinburgh Festival of Asia. She's built up a hotel and 3 restaurants, a cooking school, she runs the Ubud Annual Food Festival, and she guides spice tours out to far-flung islands. Janet Neefe, welcome to Meet the Writers. Now, we're recording this in Ubud in Bali, and there are a lot of extraneous noises, so we're going to ask people to bear with us, because actually there's so much nature around us, there's so much music, and there's also quite a lot of industry. Ubud is a very long way from where you started. Tell us about where you were born and brought up.
I was born in Melbourne, Australia, and first came to Bali in 1975. My dad had a bit of pocket money and wanted to take us on an adventure. And he didn't want to go to the regular usual suspects. He didn't want to go to Europe, etc. He wanted somewhere exotic. And he'd heard about Bali through his dad's friends, actually. One of them, his dad was an artist, so there was this sort of community of artists, and some of them would come to Bali, which is hard to fathom, like in the late 60s, because of all the political upheaval here, etc. Anyway, we arrived 75, and I was absolutely bowled over by this place that I never imagined ever existed. And so I guess it changed my life. And then I came back in 1984. In between that time, I finished school, I trained as an art teacher. My life would have just been, I guess, a teacher in Melbourne had I not discovered Bali. And came back in 84 and met my husband the second day.
Tell us about that. Tell us about that meeting with your husband on the very second day.
We were staying at Hotel Champuan, which was one of the main hotels back then. And I was travelling with a girlfriend, and we'd finished dinner, and my husband was there talking to the prince who owns that property. And they were chatting away. Then after dinner, he came up and joined us, and I thought, he's different. He's interesting. Then the men here are, again, different to your Western kind of, especially Aussie blokes, it wasn't really love at first sight, though. It was just intrigue, I guess, and this kind of refreshing difference and this kind of cosmic spiritual thing going on, which everybody who knows couture understands what I mean. Thus began the relationship.
And of course, what that's actually done has utterly changed your life. I mean, not just where you live, but how you live. You've changed your culture. You've changed your nationality.
Yes. I'm one of the fortunate ones now to travel on an Indonesian passport. So it's an eye opener to see what those who don't have, like an Australian or English American passport, the difficulties we have. But it just made a difference, because in order to run businesses here, it was better to be Indonesian. My children are Indonesian, so it just made sense.
But there's a difference, isn't there, between being Indonesian and Balinese?
Yeah, there is. And I suppose in Bali, most people, if you ask them their nationality, that they say Balinese first. And Indonesia's the umbrella. So, we think of ourselves as Balinese.
What's the difference?
I guess it's cultural. In Indonesia, with over 17,000 islands, every island or large island is like a separate country. And, the people are different, the customs are different, the food's different, the language is different. So there's that kind of difference. And also Bali's quite unique. And I think Balinese are very proud of being Balinese.
And certainly the island seems to me to have just this aura of great spirituality. Somebody described it as a spiritual reciprocity.
Well, life is very spiritual here. Of course, the religion, you can see it around you. It's a daily interaction, with the gods and the goddesses and the deities, etc. So it's a way of life, the spirituality. And even in terms of if they're not well or things like that, they address ill health in different ways too. Maybe their body is not in harmony, there's other forces, at stake. Maybe the evil spirits are making inroads. So everything they do and think and act here is sort of based on this spiritual belief system.
And I mean, there are at least three temples for every community.
For every house. Oh, and 3 main temples for every community, depending how big it is too. Then there might be a few others tacked on. But yeah, they're the main temples, and then there's all the other little bits and pieces. Yeah, and every house has a number of shrines, and that's where most people would pray every day.
How challenging then was it for you to get your head around this completely different way of life? I mean, for a girl, an art teacher from Melbourne.
I think the beauty of all of that was that I was still young, so I was very adaptable. I'm very flexible anyway, and I loved every part of it. Of course, there were challenges, but I think I really wanted to be a part of it. I loved the connection to, again, community and the closeness and importance of family. There were so many things I loved that I was just prepared to do what I was told. I'm very obedient.
I mean, since then, you've absolutely become this kind of core of the community. You've started this incredibly flourishing business, but also the book festival, the food festival, you've written books and so on. And so maybe if we go back and start with Honeymoon.
Well, Honeymoon Guesthouse, I called it that because we properly launched it the year of our honeymoon, our wedding. And I used to say, every day's a honeymoon, and it kind of stuck. Yeah, we were lucky that Ketut had land, so we built the guest house, the hotel there. We opened, Honeymoon I was living on that property from 1987, and then it's different. It was different then to what it is now. And then we opened Casaluna July 92. So
that's a restaurant?
Yes, that's our restaurant. That's the mothership, actually. But prior to that, we did have another restaurant in Monkey Forest Road, which we ran from 87 to 91. So Honeymoon just evolved, and it was really interesting because we only had 2 rooms at the start, and then Ketut and I lived in one little room, and then we had an extra room maybe for friends or my mum who used to come and stay, and then a tiny kitchen. It was really small. And we've had so many dilemmas in Indonesia. This was during the time of the East Timor issues, we didn't get so many tourists. And I said to a friend, we need to find a way to bring people to Ubud, but also to our guest house. And he said, and I can't remember what year this is, he said, have you heard about websites? I'm like, yeah, mate, yeah, kind of. He said, look, contact this girl who was the only website developer on the island at that time. He said, you contact her, and I think you need a website for your business. I said, wow, how extraordinary. So I met her, and we created a website. We only really had 2 rooms, maybe 3 to rent, and suddenly we had bookings. And I had to call a friend, can you help me? Because we've got this website and emails and bookings and, so it's kind of hilarious. And so back then you would Google hotels Bali and it would be like, Hyatt, Hilton, Honeymoon Guest House. So from that we thought, we'd better expand. So that's sort of where it started. And even my mum would always come and stay for months, and I'd have to say, look, I'm sorry, but that extra bedroom, it's booked out. And we were living crammed in one little bedroom. So then, eventually we built our house and then all the other rooms. So, bit by bit, we built new blocks.
I mean, you're making it sound like nothing, but I've seen it. It's absolutely magnificent and beautifully done. And you now have something like 80 rooms available?
Yeah, something like that. Maybe not quite 80, but it's definitely at least 60, I think. It's been interesting. We acquired the other property in 2005, and that was for sale across the road. And then the other bit, that was an exchange with Kutut's brother. So I think we do. I think it's, in fact, the guest house or the hotel is probably our strongest business, though. It's the most consistent, where the restaurants tend to go up and down. Somehow, even in the quiet seasons, we get bookings, like group bookings, yoga and, kind of retreats and those sorts of things.
And the restaurants, how many do you have now?
We have 2 main restaurants, Casa Luna and Indus, and then Honeymoon Kitchen is the front of the hotel, and that's, mainly servicing breakfasts and things like that. But we, keep it open. Before our street became busy, we didn't even open for dinner. We just did from 7 until 2 or 3, because there was really no traffic on that street. And we thought about opening for dinner, and then eventually we did, but we did not even make the food in the kitchen. We used to bring it down from Casa Luna because there was no point, because you'd have 5 tables at night max. So now it's this kind of crazy, chaotic, busy street.
Because Bali has really expanded.
Yeah, it has, and I guess like anywhere, the movement goes into the quiet areas, and everything starts developing in different sections or whatever. And of course, post-COVID, during COVID, I think we all thought while it was a difficult time, it was a really lovely reprieve from everything, from building, from everything. But of course, post-COVID, it's been a bit of an explosion.
Tell me about starting the Ubud Writers Festival.
We started that after the first Bali bombings, which were 2002. So I felt we needed to do something to save Bali. There was very little assistance. Everybody was devastated. We were on our own, And so I thought, okay, we've got to create something, an event actually, So I thought, what can we do that will be meaningful for Bali at this time? And at the time also I was finishing Fragrant Rice, and I was also being invited to festivals. And I was also talking to a friend about having, poetry nights at Casa Luna, etc., because I love literature. And I started to think about, hang on a minute, writers. Let's bring in the writers. I thought, they're the brave ones. They're the ones that stand on the front line and stand up for what they believe in. And they still suffer from that. And so I said, I want those people here, because we have to talk about things. And we're in a neutral sort of space. And I think right now that's going to be the most meaningful event or activity for Bali. And I thought also at the time, I don't want Bali to be known anymore as this playful destination, with beaches and booze and braids and bombs. I wanted to shift and to really acknowledge the strong culture that's already here. So, that was how we started.
And it's been incredibly successful. You've had writers from all over the world. Many huge publications have called it Asia's answer to Edinburgh, the best festival in the world, and so on. You've had an enormous amount of love, not just from the literary community, but from further afield.
Yeah, it's true. And when we started, we told all the publishers in Australia, and they were all jumping up and down for joy. They were so excited. We've had so much support. And as you say, a lot of love. People call it a human rights festival posing as a writers' festival, actually, because I guess because of the way it started, we've always included, again, these fearless journalists and those fighting for a cause and, talking about the human condition, things like that. So that's sort of really part of who we are. So the aim is with the festival, for me personally, I want to think that everybody that has attended leaves the festival with a slightly different perspective, or as a slightly different person that's maybe aware of what's going on a deeper level in different parts of the world.
And in terms of your audience, is that local? Is it foreign, a mixture?
Look, there's a lot of Australians. We're just down the road, or up the road. It's almost half now, half Indonesian, half non-Indonesian, and the non-Indonesians are mainly Australian. But we do get, Americans, French, English, Dutch, whatever. We do get an amount of others. And I would say among the Indonesian audience, a lot of them are from Jakarta or other parts of Java, more than perhaps Bali. Bali, they're a bit shy to attend these things, and perhaps if it's, it's mainly in English. We do have translators, but nevertheless, and there's also quite a young audience of Indonesians. That's what we find very refreshing. So we're always trying to make sure we have a youthful component in the festival to keep them happy.
Mm-hmm. As if that wasn't enough, you've also started a food festival.
Well, that's my other serious passion, obviously. And I always wanted to start a food festival, but I had to wait because I thought the team will kill me. And, back in the day too, if you had have said you were opening a food festival in Bali, everybody would have just laughed and said, like Bali Belly or something like that. So now the food scene in Bali has certainly elevated into something quite gourmand and exciting. We have a really diverse range of chefs and restaurants, etc. So it's a very exciting food scene. But I'm really passionate about local food. So yeah, we managed to pull it off the ground in 2015, and yeah, it's fun. It's great. Food is fun. It's wonderful. I mean, people just come in every day and hang out in all the food stalls, and we have music and film and discussions and workshops and long table lunches and dinners, and it's just a glorious celebration.
Now, the thing that brings both of these, and indeed your whole hospitality enterprise together, is this wonderful book, Fragrant Rice. My Continuing Love Affair with Bali is the subtitle. And it brings together your key recipes, but also tells us about key moments in your life, particularly around your children.
Yeah, I mean, it really is paying homage to my children. And I guess because, I hadn't had children before I came here, but just the intrigue in the customs was, every moment was delightful, actually. I just loved it so much. And I wanted people to know that the reason for such balanced, happy people here, it starts with the way they bring them up. And for me, it was a joy, actually, being a mother, the way because I always had nannies and staff to help. And of course, all Balinese love kids, so I felt so lucky and blessed to be here.
So tell me about the kids.
Yeah, they're all different. There's Dewi, my eldest, who's an absolute angel, and Krishna, my eldest boy, who's also a gorgeous person. And there's Lakshmi, who's probably the most like me, so she's hilarious, but interesting. And then Arjuna, who's a cute little puppy dog, and he's absolutely obsessed with food.
Lakshmi's they're all interesting, but tell us about Lakshmi's sort of progression, because this is fascinating.
She studied fashion. She first went to Melbourne, actually, to study fashion, and then she decided that she didn't really like Melbourne, which I was like horrified. That's my home. So she decided to move to Florence and study fashion there. So she lived there for 4 years. And when she finished, she came back to Bali. So that was 2020. And when she came back in 2020, that was sort of in the midst of COVID. She'd been waiting to get out to come to Bali. And she was really shocked to see how quiet it was, how kind of sad people were. And anyway, in the meantime, somebody suggested to her, well, now that you're back, why don't you join Putri Indonesia, which is Miss Indonesia or Miss Universe Indonesia? Why don't you join that? So she thought, yeah, why not? Okay, I'll do it. So she joined this pageant. At the time, I said, why on earth would you do that? And I'm sort of glad that she never listens to me, because she won. And so she became, Putri Indonesia or Miss Universe Indonesia. And then she went to Miss Universe in Houston. Oh, actually, it was in New Orleans, but we landed in Houston. So that was an incredible journey. She made wonderful friends. I was surprised how lovely. All the girls seemed to be to each other, just like that film. It was
Miss Congeniality.
That's it, yes, Miss Congeniality. You know, that's cute. The girls were cute. So it's been a great journey, and finally she has a voice now because she has a big following, and everybody in Bali knows about her. So yeah, we're still now taking the next steps to see what sort of path she can carve out. She's very much about community and building communities and, you know, the literature thing. She's developed this new platform called Shelf Therapy. So she's her advocacy was always reading and literature, and now she's taking that a step further, and we have lots of plans. So it's been a transformation for her, no doubt about it.
Tell me more about the book.
Originally, the idea was to create a recipe book, and I was teaching cooking here. I've been teaching cooking here for a long time. So I was compiling all the recipes, and I thought, okay, I'm going to write a Balinese cookbook. And then I used to tell people in the cooking class, and they'd say, well, you have to include all your stories, because during the class, because I had this brood of kids, you know, so I was telling them all the little stories about the children. And they would say, you have to include those stories in the class. I'm like, oh, do I have to? And people were like, of course you do. So from gathering, 50 or 100 recipes, I started to recall all the little stories. And eventually I sort of had this first draft of a book. And it was interesting though, because I was sort of struggling to work out what sort of book it would be, because I felt a bit shy to make it about me. I really was just initially writing a cookbook and then talking about the Balinese culture, but a friend of mine said, you are the book. And once you work that out, then everything will fall into place. So I had to navigate that journey, whatever. So it became recipes linked to the stories. And I guess, in those early years when I was first living here, having the children, learning about the culture, the stories were quite intriguing. And so it just evolved from that.
Now, that's not the only thing you've written. You have another recipe book, but you also have blogs and all sorts.
I'm not as active writing anymore, only because I don't really have time. Look, I always wanted to write a cookbook, so finally I managed to get a cookbook published, which is now out of print. I actually own the rights, so I have to reprint it. So I did finish a cookbook. I used to write for Jakarta Post and Garuda In-Flight magazine, so I've got all these little stories all over the place. So, but I don't really get to write anymore.
Because you're so busy running your empire.
Yes. Yeah, it's a bit of a dilemma, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So tell us about your future plans, because this is all going so well, but clearly you are very busy. You've got a team of incredibly competent staff, and I know that you are planning to expand.
I mean, I would still love to start a weaving festival. And during COVID, I did do a 3-day event at Indus. I called it Weaving Stories. So I brought in 6 groups of weavers from around Bali, which, it's a small island, but there are so many areas, little pockets, where people still are weaving, and especially during COVID. I've worked in weaving for a long time because of my homewares business back in the day, and so I'm determined to somehow get that off the ground, but it's just I'll just have to juggle the time a bit. But the other thing I do, which I really love, are the spice tours. These sailing trips on Indonesian pirate ships. I love doing that. That's my getaway time.
Tell us more about that.
Well, we land in Ambon, which is East Indonesia. The Eastern Indonesia is a little bit forgotten in Indonesia. I mean, people are looking at it more now, but it's quite a remote part of Indonesia. So we land in Ambon and we jump on board this Fenisi, which, as I said, is an Indonesian pirate ship. And we go island hopping and exploring all the different villages and cultures and food, etc. And then we go to Run, which is famous for the exchange with Manhattan. That's a whole other story. And Nutmeg, of course. I don't know if you've read Nathaniel's Nutmeg, but it's Nutmeg City. So, and then we land up in an island called Bandanera, which is like the icing of the cake. It's icing on the cake. this picture-perfect little township on this perfect little harbour with this sort of hotel that looks like it's something out of Somerset Maugham or something. It's like time has stood still there, and there's still, colonial buildings, of course, like a cannon on the side of the road and a statue of King Wilhelm and all sorts of things. So it's magical and extraordinary because, as I said, it's like time has stood still, but it has this very strong, actually violent history. And the people that join me on the trip, they're there to learn about the colonial history, but also to explore this absolute glorious wonderland in the middle of nowhere.
Now, my brother and I, are here as part of an experiment, really.
Yes. Yeah, we've been talking about creating events out of season or off season because, when the festival finishes, we spend all year planning for those 4 days or 5 days, and then it's finished. And so we've always been looking at, how can we keep the spirit alive and piggyback other festivals, and because people are flying across all the time. So, it was an experiment to see how we can create other events. We've started to run writing retreats as well. So, and just keep the literary scene alive.
And a publishing house?
My daughter's done all this research, actually. She said, we should be publishers. I'm like, I know. So, I'll sit down and look through what she presented me with a whole case study to be a publishing house. So I would love to do that.
Is there room for that in your busy life?
I've got a daughter. I'll let her do it. That's the key here. The key is to find really bright people and just, pop them in those roles. So...
Janet, I don't think there's any stopping you now, is there?
Oh, well, it's all fun, If it wasn't fun, I wouldn't do it. It is a juggling act, yeah. But anyway, it's all fun. And I guess, too, when you get to my age, you sort of think, okay, I've only got this much time left, so I can't waste any of it. I've got jobs to do, and they need to be completed.
And is there another book in your future?
I was thinking about writing about the Spice Islands and the people I meet, because the food is totally different. So I did write to many publishers, but most of them didn't answer me. So I'll still think about how I can, create this book. I would love to, but it's the food's amazing.
And Janet, just before we go, I have to ask you about something that's really been bothering me since you first told me. Obviously, you're steeped in Balinese tradition and you take part in all of the rituals and so on. And one of those is teeth filing. It slightly freaked me out, to be honest.
I knew you were going to ask me that when you said something that's been bothering you. Yeah, it's one of those rites of passage. And you have to have that done before you can go to heaven. So even if someone dies and they haven't had it done yet, they'll do it, when they're already dead. They say that you taste with your teeth and the top teeth, and that those flavours that you taste represent the vices, but they only have 6, they've dropped a few. Greed, anger, passion, etc. So the belief is if you file them straight, then you're going to balance out all these extreme kind of emotions, etc.
Does it hurt?
No, not at all. Well, because it's really only symbolic now. Back in the early days, I think in Southeast Asia, maybe Asia, they had a bit of a thing about teeth, But nowadays it's just a gentle with a, file. It's just a regular file. But they bless it, so then it becomes sacred. So it's kind of cute. It's a really extraordinary ceremony. It takes 3 days, maybe longer. And the best thing about getting your teeth filed is after that they give you a little fresh turmeric juice that's really beautiful. The one I had, I thought, wow, that's the best I've ever had. So, there's always a little bit of drink and food involved, of course. So, it's an intriguing ceremony.
And an intriguing lifestyle, a wonderful book, and just such a joy to meet you. Janet de Neefe, thank you so much.
Thank you, and I've loved meeting you too and hanging out. We've had lots of fun. Thank you.
Janet Neefe, many thanks for being on Meet the Writers, and thank you too for hosting us here in beautiful Ubud. Janet's memoir, Fragrant Rice, is published by Perry Plus, as well as her book Bali, The Food of My Island Home. You've been listening to Meet the Writers, thanks to my producer Steph Chungu, who also edited this episode. And you can download this show and previous episodes from our website, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thanks for listening.